Hello, this is Angelia, and you're watching or listening to the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about preventing teenage suicide, and we're actually going to take back up on that because that's an important thing. Um, Warning signs include withdrawal from relationships, talking about death. So like if your kid stops hanging around their friends, that's something you can notice and be aware of, and kind of say, hey, what's going on? And again, if they're talking about death, that's a pretty serious sign. The hereafter, talking about do you think we're going to heaven and stuff like that, or suicide, giving away prized possessions, like oh give this to my sister. I don't need it anymore. Drug or alcohol abuse. Because if kids doing drug and alcohol, then they have a problem, and that's basically a cry for help. Personality changes. You know your kid, and if something ain't right, you know that too, and you should step in. Such as rise in anger, boredom or apathy, unusual neglect of their appearance. Now, some kids, they don't care about their appearance, especially boys. So, it's a change. Whereas someone used to be very put together and clean, and now suddenly they're not. That's what you're looking for, is that change. Difficulty concentrating at work or in school. And like you might have an A student, suddenly the grades slip down to, a D. That's a problem, and that's something that you need to take note of. Staying away from work or school or other unusual activities. Any abnormal change is usually saying there's a problem there. Complaints of physical problems when nothing is organically wrong. I knew a girl in school, and she was having self-esteem issues, and she was depressed. Us kids kind of knew it. The parents evidently didn't. And she was sick a lot. She went to the sick room a lot. She would, be out sick a lot. And we all kind of felt like it was, we didn't use the word anxiety back then. It was like, because she was so nervous, She's all worried about everything. And yeah. And eating or sleeping much more or much less than usual. And I know when my sister passed away, I lost about 20 pounds. Because after school we would eat, a snack together, usually a frozen pizza she would cook. But, I wasn't eating with her after school. And I wasn't eating a lot, at home. So I lost a lot of weight. And my boyfriend at the time was taking me out to get milkshakes and stuff because he was like, you're getting too skinny. I can see all your bones. You need to gain some weight. Friends or family may be able to help by talking to a young person about his or her suicidal thoughts to bring them out into the open. So, it's a touchy subject, but if you feel like, your kid is really depressed and they're showing signs of withdrawing, you can say, hey, what is going on with you? I'd like to help you. And if you see anything that might indicate that they're thinking about suicide, say, hey, I love you. I don't want you to do this. This may be a hard time for you right now, but it won't be forever. I had hard times when I was a teenager, but it's not going to follow you for the rest of your life. And sometimes they just need to hear that. Telling others who are in a position to do something about it. Okay. The person's parents or partner or other family members can get involved. A close friend, a therapist, or a counselor. So someone needs to step up and talk to these kids and be there for them. Otherwise, we know what the end is going to be, right? And showing the person that she or he has other options besides death, even though none of them may be ideal. And let's face it, whose life is ideal? And that's important for them to know. because kids looking, in from the outside always think everybody else's life is better than theirs. And you need to let them know, no, life's not perfect, but it can be good. You might not feel that way now, but in a week or a month or a year, it'll be better. And they need people to tell them that because, at that age, they're still having a lot of all or nothing thinking. Telephone hotlines are the most prevalent type of suicide intervention for adolescents, but their effectiveness appears to be minimal. So, these teen suicide hotlines, they're there, but they're not exactly effective because a lot of them are not going to call this number. And if they do, they might still feel like this is just a voice on the other end of the phone. What do they know? They need the people around them to get involved. In fact, some of these programs may do harm by exaggerating the extent of teenage suicide and painting it as a reaction to normal stresses of adolescence rather than a pathological act. So, they might just say, oh, well, yeah, it's normal for you to feel that way or whatever. But it's not normal for you to think about killing yourself. That says you've hit rock bottom, and you need to talk to someone. You need some help. Instead, programs should identify and treat young people at particular risk of suicide, including those who have already attempted suicide. Teachers, counselors need to be on the lookout for kids who are on that edge and get involved. Don't act like it ain't my business. Yes, it's your business. It takes a village, as the saying goes. Equally important is to attack the risk factors. For example, through programs to reduce substance abuse, violence, and access to guns, and to strengthen families and improve parenting skills. There are programs in some schools, but not in all schools, to teach parenting skills and to teach young people that stuff happens. Life's not great. It might not even be fair, but don't let and it's like I used to tell my coaching clients and my students, don't let the bad guys win. If you let them impact your life that bad, they win. Be the hero of your own story and you win in spite of them. Programs to enhance self-esteem and build problem-solving and coping abilities can be directed toward young children and continue throughout the school years. And like I said, my kids coming up, they had a class called Group where the counselor brought them in and talked to them about stuff. And I thought that was great. That's what we need in all the schools. In a national survey of 7th to 12th graders, almost 1/4 of the students reported that they had seriously considered suicide during the past year. Now, isn't that sad? 1/4 of our kids who've reported it. Now, that doesn't mean they've all reported it. Some of them might have been scared to say, yeah, I've thought about it. So that's 1/4 of our kids who have thought about killing themselves. That's a big portion. Other surveys show that as many as 12% of girls and 6% of boys actually attempt to kill themselves. So that's, over 1/10 of the girls. That's a proportionate number for anything, So you need to watch your children and talk to your children, because if you don't know what's going on with them, and if you're too busy, you might lose your child because you're just not paying attention. Young people who attempt suicide tend to have histories of emotional illness, commonly depression, substance abuse, antisocial or aggressive behavior, or unstable personalities. So you kind of know if your kid's troubled or not. And if your kid is troubled, that's the one you need to watch carefully. They tend to be either perpetrators or victims of violence. So the bullies and the kids who are being bullied. these are the ones especially at risk, because both of them have self-esteem. The bully, that's why he's bullying, and the victim, because he's being a victim. You know, they also tend to have attempted suicide before, or to have friends or family members who did. So in their circle, it became acceptable, because this happened, so and so did this. So they're like, oh, well, they checked out, maybe I'll just check out too. So again, talk with your kids, be there for your kids. Don't let your child make this decision, and then that's the end of their life. Alcohol plays a part in fully half of all teenage suicides. So talk to them about drinking, talk to them about alcohol. And like I said, I told mine, I don't want you drinking to get drunk. I don't want you doing that, because alcoholism runs in our family. We got 2 uncles and a cousin who passed away that way, and I don't want that to happen to you. So, be a pest to your kids. It's okay to be a pest in their life, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. Now, you don't have to micromanage every little thing, because that can lead your child to have stress and anxiety, because they're not getting to have their own life. So certainly don't micromanage their life for them, but you can be a pest and say, hey, I heard so and so, I saw so and so, I don't want you doing that. It's okay to do that. Suicidal teenagers tend to think poorly of themselves. So, again, low self-esteem definitely plays a part in it. To feel hopeless, because if they don't think anything better is coming in the future, why bother? And to have poor impulse control and low tolerance for frustration and stress. So, if they have poor impulse control, like your kids with ADD, ADHD, they're more likely to follow through. And if the kid is under stress, they want a relief. They want the stress to be done, and that might seem to them like a good idea at the time. Feelings of depression may be masked as boredom. So when your kids start saying they're bored, my grandma told me, only boring people are boring. Go read an encyclopedia, There's no reason to be bored. Apathy. When you see a kid don't care about nothing. I know a person, and then they was going through a period like that, and they certainly had depression. Hyperactivity. You see sometimes kids, and you wonder, what's going on at home, because they're acting like a wild child, and something's up there. Or physical problems, because if it's a health issue, if they're disabled in some way, that's going to impact them, and it's also going to, unfortunately, let other kids have an in to be mean and pick on them. These young people are often alienated from their parents and have no one outside the family to turn to. And that's a shame, because if the parents are not there for them and they don't have any other family and friends to turn to, that puts them in a very vulnerable position where they're more likely to follow through. Many come from troubled families. Again, trouble in the family is the number one cause of most all mental problems. Often with a history of unemployment, imprisonment, or suicidal behavior. So if the parents are doing these things, the kids are more likely to think this is an okay way out. Excuse me. And a high proportion of these young people have been abused or neglected. So of course, if you grew up in abuse or you've been neglected, you might feel like, well, no one cared about me anyway, and this is how they treated me anyway, so why should I care about myself? Why should I bother? I might as well just check out. School problems, academic or behavioral, are common among would-be suicides. So if kids having problems at school, they're not succeeding, they're having behavior issues, that's something you need to talk to them about. Don't just let it slide. Protective factors that reduce the risk of suicide include a sense of connectedness to family and school. So, if you're there for them and you're connected to a family, then you feel like you belong somewhere. And if you take pride in your school, Like I said, you can get your kids involved in, there's all kind of extracurricular activities. Let them do whatever they want. Let them give it a try. One of my sons tried a juggling class. He didn't end up being a juggler, but he enjoyed it, and he could balance, stuff on his hand, and it was pretty cool. Just let them feel a sense of pride in something, and be there for them so they feel like they're connected to someone. Emotional well-being, again, if you are emotionally well, that's hard in this day and age. You're going to have a better outlook than someone who's not. And academic achievement, because if they're getting good grades, then they feel a sense of pride that they're achieving, and that is going to look, to their future, and they're less likely to consider suicide as an option. Aspects of cognitive maturation. Despite the perils of adolescence, most young people emerge from the teenage years with mature, healthy bodies and a zest for life. And most of us, if you think back to that time, you realize you were ready to go. I'm a grown person now, and I'm going to have this great life. Their cognitive development has continued to, so your mind is growing. It's not just your body that grows up, your mind grows up too. Adolescents not only look different from younger children, they also think differently. So, if you think about the difference between how a toddler thinks and an 18-year-old thinks, there's a pretty big difference there between those ages. Although their thinking may remain immature in some ways, many are capable of abstract reasoning and sophisticated moral judgments and can plan more realistically for the future. And you can help them do that. Decide if they just have no idea what they want to do. You think about, when you're little, what did you want to do? What's your best subject in school? What do you enjoy doing the most? And chances are, like I said, whatever your best subject is, whatever comes easiest to you, that's what you enjoy doing the most. Everybody has their own little spot. So you can't compare apples and oranges or decide you're going to be a this, because then you're going to ruin your child's life. You're going to be unhappy all their life being a this when they wanted to be a that. Piaget stage of formal operations. According to Piaget, adolescents enter the highest level of cognitive development, formal operations, when they develop the capacity for abstract thought. So, before that, concrete thinking, and their pretend is not necessarily abstract thought. That's how kids practice, but abstract thought, you can pull a thought and think about, what would happen in society if this thing happened, or what if we changed this. Excuse me. This development, usually around age 11, gives them a new, more flexible way to manipulate information. So they learn how to take information and apply it to their lives, apply it to their situation in the area they're in. So, they learn how to internalize on purpose, and come up with theories for, how they can use this information. No longer limited to the here and now, they can understand historical time and extraterrestrial space. They can use symbols, for example, letting this letter X stand for an unknown numeral, like in algebra, and thus can learn algebra and calculus. They can better appreciate metaphor and allegory, and thus can find richer meanings in literature. And I certainly enjoyed, reading and, finding things out. I was always at the library until the day I got kicked out of the library because some friends told the librarian I didn't go to the school anymore just to be funny, and then I actually couldn't go to the library anymore because I didn't have an ID, because I didn't have a license, and thanks a lot. They can think in terms of what might be, not just what is. So, they can look at society and think, oh, well, if we just did this, this would be better. And teachers try to teach this in children, but they can't always grasp it until they're mentally ready to grasp it. They can imagine possibilities and can form and test hypotheses. And like I said, some elementary school teachers teach this. Come up with a theory and then we're going to test it. But until the child is really ready, that's, mental ability that, has to wait till they're really ready to happen. People in this stage of formal operations can integrate what they have learned in the past with the challenges of the present and make plans for the future. So, this is how we grow as people, and start to plan our life once, we get past the age of 18 and we're out of high school. Thought at this stage has flexibility not possible in the stage of concrete operations. So, with the flexible thought, we can come up with more possibilities. We can dream up, a future for ourselves, other than I'm going to grow up and be a princess, or I'm going to be a firefighter, and have no concrete idea of how we're going to get there from that point. And the facts are, if you think you're going to grow up and be a princess and you weren't born into a royal family, sorry, kid, that's a problem. The ability to think abstractly has emotional applications, too. Earlier, a child could love a parent and hate a classmate. Now the adolescent can love freedom or hate exploitation. So they can have feelings about things other than immediate people, whether a thing is something that's dear to them or not. The possible and the ideal captivate both mind and feeling. Because, like I said, you're being pumped full of hormones, and so you feel very strongly, about social justice and things like that when you're a teenager. Thus could Anne Frank, in her attic hideout, express her ideals and her hopes for the future. Hypothetical-deductive reasoning. To appreciate the difference formal reasoning makes, let's follow the progress of a typical child in dealing with a classic Piagetian problem, the pendulum problem. The child, we'll call him Adam, is shown the pendulum, an object hanging from a string. He is then shown how he can change any of 4 factors. 1, the length of the string. 2, the weight of the object. 3, the height from which the object is released. And 4, the amount of force he may use to push the object. So he's given these 4 variables that he can use to change the way it swings, or, the desired area that it swings in. He is asked to figure out which factor or combination of factors determine how fast the pendulum swings. When Adam first sees the pendulum, he is not yet 7 years old and is in the pre-operational stage. Unable to formulate a plan for attacking the problem, he tries one thing after another in a hit-or-miss manner. First, he puts the light weight on a long string and pushes it. Then he tries swinging a heavy weight on a short string. Then he removes the weight entirely. Not only is his method random, but he also cannot understand or report what has happened. So he's not mature enough in thinking yet to have a logical, attack at this, and can't explain why and what happened. Adam next encounters the pendulum at age 10, when he is in the stage of concrete operations. This time, he discovers that varying the length of the string and the weight of the object affects the speed of the swing. However, because he varies both factors at the same time, he cannot tell which is critical or whether both are critical. So he's starting to get some thought process in there, but not quite enough to, decide which is important, or, are both things important. Adam is confronted with the pendulum for a 3rd time at age 15. And this time he goes at the problem systematically. He designs an experiment to test all the possible hypotheses, varying one factor at a time. First, the length of the string. Next, the weight of the object. Then the height from which it is released. And finally, the amount of force used. Each time holding the other 3 factors constant. So now he's going at it like a real scientist would, and trying to decide which of these things is important. In this way, He is able to determine that only one factor, the length of the string, determines how fast the pendulum swings. Adam's solution to the pendulum problem shows that he has arrived at the stage of formal operations. So Adam was 15, so we can say that's probably an average. So, about this time is when you can expect your youngsters to develop some critical thinking and, figure things out, and be planning for their futures. He is now capable of hypothetical-deductive reasoning, so he's on his way to being Sherlock Holmes. He can develop a hypothesis and can design an experiment to test it. He considers all the relationships he can imagine and goes through them systematically, one by one, to eliminate the false and arrive at the true. And this is important with our information we get on a day-to-day basis. Hypothetical deductive reasoning gives him a tool to solve problems, from fixing the family car to constructing a political theory. Microgenetic studies of problem-solving behavior support Piaget's analysis of how concrete operations differ from formal operations. In one such study, 5th and 6th graders and non-college educated adults were asked to design experiments to understand physical phenomenon, such as factors affecting the speed of a vessel through a canal. And that might be, something you might need to know someday if you're going to be a boat pilot. Pre-adolescents were less systematic than adults in exploring such problems, typically varying more than one factor at the same time, as Adam did with the pendulum at that age. To solve such problems, people need to think like scientists. They should not rule out a hypothesis before testing it, just because it seems unlikely to be true. This is a common mistake among children. So, even some adults have this problem. Personally, I tell people, and they're like, well, I don't know about that. I don't think. It's like, we have Google now. You can Google it and see. They need to know what theories or strategies they are following. Sometimes something many pre-adolescents do not do. So they just, dismiss things and don't care about things, and so they don't worry about things. What brings about the shift to formal reasoning? Piaget attributed it to a combination of brain maturation and expanding environmental opportunities. So as your brain grows and gets smarter, when you go to school, there's more opportunities for you because you're being put in with people your age, and the curriculum is changing, and so more and more things are coming your way. Excuse me. Both are essential. Even if young people's neurological development has advanced enough to permit formal reasoning, they can attain it only with appropriate stimulation. So even though you might be smart enough to have formal reasoning, without the appropriate stimulation to grow it, you're not going to have it. One way this can happen is through cooperative effort. When college students, average age 18 and a half, were told to set up their own experiments to solve a chemistry problem, students randomly assigned to work in pairs solved more problems than those who worked alone. So, it just shows you that two minds are better than one. The more the partners challenged each other's reasoning, the greater were their advances in thinking. So by, questioning other people's points of view, the more your brain grows and the more their brain grows. So if the two political aisles in this country got together and started talking about stuff, they might actually figure some stuff out. Wouldn't that be amazing? Culture and schooling seem to play a role, as Piaget ultimately recognized. French 10 to 15-year-olds in the 1990s did better on Piagetian tests of formal operations than their counterparts 2 or 3 decades earlier, when fewer had secondary school education. When adolescents in New Guinea and Rwanda were tested on the pendulum problem, none were able to solve it. And that's because they were not having as many opportunities for the thought that the more industrialized French country had. On the other hand, Chinese children in Hong Kong who had been to British schools did at least as well as U.S. or European children because they had a better education. School children in Central Java and New South Wales all showed some formal operations abilities. So it just goes to show you the more civilized and educated a country is, the better the children are going to be off. Apparently, this kind of thinking is a learned ability that is not equally necessary or equally valued in all cultures. Because in a culture like this, the thinking, the deductive reasoning might be valued, but, like in Java, or, like in Africa, if you're a Zulu warrior, what you're worried about is, having your cows and getting a good wife, and that doesn't really involve deductive reasoning, in most cases. Now, we could go into hypothetical, but we're not going to do that. So that's where I'm going to leave you today, and I hope this helped you to figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share so we can spread this educational program around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. So that's all for now. Until next time.